"If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." Khalil Al-Rasheed laughed dismissively as he gestured toward his disabled Lamborghini Huracan. The stunning Tiffany blue supercar's hood raised like a metallic prayer to reveal the complex V10 engine that had left him stranded outside Precision Auto Works in the industrial district of Detroit. The 42-year-old, heir to a Middle Eastern petroleum fortune, had been driving through the city after a business meeting when his $250,000 vehicle had suddenly lost power, forcing him to coast into the first repair shop he could find. Though the modest garage, with its peeling paint and outdated equipment, seemed unlikely to house anyone capable of diagnosing problems in Italian automotive engineering, what Khalil didn't expect was that the quiet black woman in oil-stained coveralls who approached his car with professional confidence was Dr. Keisha Washington, a former aerospace engineer who had given up a six-figure career at NASA to honor her late father's dream of running the family auto shop, and whose expertise in advanced propulsion systems made her uniquely qualified to solve problems that had stumped dealership technicians and exotic car specialists across 3 states. The Lamborghini Huracan that had brought Khalil to this unlikely encounter was one of only 12 vehicles ever produced in the exclusive Tiffany blue metallic finish, a custom color that had cost an additional $40,000 and required special ordering through Lamborghini's Ad Personam program. The distinctive hue made the vehicle instantly recognizable and served as both a demonstration of his wealth and a reflection of his preference for standing out in crowds of more conventionally colored supercars. The custom paint had required 17 separate coats applied by master craftsmen at Lamborghini's Sant'Agata Bolognese facility, with each layer carefully cured and polished to achieve the depth and brilliance that made the color appear to shift between pale turquoise and deeper aqua depending on the lighting conditions. The process had delayed delivery of the vehicle by 6 months, but Khalil had considered the wait worthwhile for the exclusivity and visual impact that the unique color provided. The breakdown that had left him stranded in Detroit was particularly frustrating because he had been driving to the airport after concluding negotiations for a renewable energy investment that represented his attempt to diversify his family's business interests beyond petroleum extraction. The irony that his fossil fuel fortune was now funding solar and wind power projects was not lost on him, but the transition required him to travel extensively and maintain a schedule that left little room for mechanical failures or unexpected delays. The renewable energy investments represented more than just business diversification for Khalil, because they reflected his growing awareness of environmental responsibilities and his desire to create a legacy that extended beyond the petroleum industry that had built his family's fortune. The transition to clean energy technologies was both personally meaningful and strategically necessary as global markets shifted towards sustainable alternatives to fossil fuels. His business philosophy had evolved significantly over the past 5 years, driven partly by generational changes in his family's leadership, and partly by his own recognition that the future belonged to companies that could adapt to changing environmental and social expectations. The Detroit meetings had been part of a broader strategy to establish partnerships with American renewable energy companies that possessed innovative technologies but lacked the capital necessary for large-scale implementation. The timing of the mechanical failure was particularly inconvenient because he had a connecting flight to catch for meetings in California the following morning, discussions that would determine whether his investment group would commit $200 million to a revolutionary solar cell manufacturing process that promised to reduce production costs by 40% while increasing efficiency ratings. The California meetings were crucial for finalizing partnerships with technology companies that had developed breakthrough innovations in renewable energy storage and distribution, projects that could transform both the environmental impact and the economic viability of large-scale solar and wind power installations throughout the Middle East and North Africa. The ironic comment about marriage had been delivered with the casual arrogance that characterized his interactions with service workers, a defensive mechanism he had developed to maintain distance from people who might be interested in his wealth rather than his character. The suggestion was meant to be so outrageous that it would highlight the impossibility of the repair task, while also establishing his social superiority over someone he assumed lacked the education and expertise to work on such sophisticated machinery. The habit of making dismissive comments to service workers had developed during his years of dealing with people whose primary interest in him seemed to be financial rather than personal, creating a cynical worldview that made it difficult for him to recognize genuine competence or character when it appeared in unexpected contexts. His wealth had surrounded him with people who either wanted something from him or were intimidated by his resources, making authentic relationships challenging to develop or maintain. The custom Tiffany blue paint job had been inspired by his late mother's favorite jewelry brand, though he rarely shared this sentimental motivation with others, preferring to let people assume it was merely another display of excessive wealth, rather than a memorial tribute that held deep personal significance for him. His mother had worn a Tiffany blue scarf on the day she had taught him to drive, and the color had become associated in his mind with her memory and the values she had tried to instill in him before cancer had taken her when he was 22. The relationship with his mother had been one of the few authentic connections in his life, because her illness had stripped away the superficialities and social positioning that characterized most of his other relationships, forcing both of them to confront what truly mattered during her final months. Her death had left him emotionally isolated and suspicious of people's motivations, contributing to the defensive arrogance that now characterized his interactions with strangers. Precision Auto Works occupied a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had seen better days, with boarded-up buildings and empty lots serving as reminders of Detroit's industrial decline and the economic challenges that had forced many businesses to close or relocate to more prosperous areas. The auto shop itself showed signs of struggle, with equipment that was functional but outdated, and a customer base that consisted mainly of local residents who needed affordable repairs rather than wealthy clients who could afford premium service. The building's history reflected the broader economic transformation of Detroit, having originally served as a parts distribution center for one of the major automotive manufacturers before being abandoned during the industry's downturn and eventually purchased by Keisha's father for a fraction of its original value. The conversion to an auto repair facility had required extensive renovation and investment that had stretched the family's financial resources, but created a business that could serve the community's transportation needs. The neighborhood surrounding the shop reflected the broader economic challenges that had affected Detroit over the past several decades, with closed factories and abandoned residential areas, creating an environment where surviving businesses like Precision Auto Works served as important anchors for communities that had lost much of their economic foundation. The contrast between this struggling urban environment and the wealthy suburbs where Khalil conducted most of his business was stark and uncomfortable. The contrast between the shop's modest appearance and the expensive Tiffany blue vehicle now parked in its service bay was striking, highlighting the economic disparities that separated Khalil's world of luxury and privilege from the working-class environment where he now found himself dependent on the skills and expertise of people he would normally never encounter in his business or social circles. The visual impact of the custom-colored Lamborghini in such modest surroundings created an almost surreal scene that emphasized the randomness of circumstances that could bring together people from completely different social and economic backgrounds, forcing interactions that might never occur under normal circumstances, but could prove transformative for everyone involved. Keisha Washington had inherited the shop from her father 5 years earlier, along with the financial responsibilities and emotional burdens that came with maintaining a family business in a challenging economic environment. Her decision to leave NASA had been driven by loyalty and love, rather than career ambition, because her father's death had left the shop without anyone who possessed the technical knowledge necessary to keep it operating at the level of excellence that had built its reputation over 3 decades. The decision to leave her aerospace career had been one of the most difficult choices of her life, because it meant abandoning work that had been intellectually fulfilling and professionally rewarding to take on responsibilities that were emotionally meaningful but financially challenging. The transition had required her to sacrifice personal career goals for family obligations and community service that provided different but equally important forms of satisfaction. The transition from aerospace engineering to automotive repair had required Keisha to adapt her advanced technical training to more practical applications, but her background in rocket propulsion systems and spacecraft design provided her with analytical skills and problem-solving abilities that proved invaluable when dealing with complex mechanical failures that stumped other mechanics. Her NASA experience had taught her to approach technical problems systematically and to consider possibilities that others might dismiss as unlikely or impossible. Her work at NASA had included projects involving advanced propulsion systems for Mars exploration vehicles, where the margin for error was zero, and diagnostic procedures had to account for the possibility that repairs would need to be performed millions of miles from Earth using only the tools and resources available on the spacecraft. This experience had taught her to think creatively about problem solving and to develop multiple backup solutions for every critical system. The projects she had worked on at NASA included development of ion propulsion systems for deep space missions, advanced life support systems for long-duration space flights, and experimental rocket engines that used alternative fuel sources to reduce dependence on traditional chemical propellants. Her expertise in these cutting-edge technologies had made her one of the youngest engineers ever to receive security clearance for classified space program research. The intellectual challenges of aerospace engineering had been matched by the satisfaction of contributing to projects that expanded human understanding of the universe and advanced the frontiers of scientific knowledge, making her career change to automotive repair seem like a step backward professionally, even though it was motivated by family loyalty and community responsibility. The sacrifice she had made in leaving her aerospace career had been significant, both financially and professionally, because her work at NASA had been leading toward involvement in Mars mission planning and advanced spacecraft development projects that represented the pinnacle of engineering achievement. But her father's legacy and the community that depended on the auto shop had ultimately mattered more to her than personal career advancement or prestige. The contrast between her scientific background and her current work environment was stark, with the precision and unlimited budgets of space program engineering replaced by the practical constraints and financial limitations of a neighborhood auto shop. But Keisha had discovered that the challenge of diagnosing and repairing problems with limited resources and older equipment required creativity and ingenuity that made her work satisfying in ways that her previous career had not provided. Her reputation for solving difficult problems had begun to attract customers from beyond the immediate neighborhood, including owners of high-performance vehicles who had heard about her ability to diagnose issues that other mechanics could not identify or resolve. Word of mouth in the automotive community had brought her increasingly challenging cases, though she had never worked on a vehicle as exotic or expensive as Khalil's custom-colored Lamborghini. The financial struggles of keeping the shop operating profitably had been compounded by her refusal to compromise on quality or to take shortcuts that might increase profit margins at the expense of customer safety or satisfaction. Her father had built the business on principles of honesty and excellence that she was determined to maintain despite the economic pressures that made such standards difficult to sustain. The equipment in the shop included some tools and diagnostic machines that Keisha had purchased with her own savings to handle the increasingly sophisticated electronic systems that characterized modern vehicles, investments that strained her personal finances, but were necessary for maintaining the shop's ability to service the full range of vehicles that customers brought for repair. "Sir, I understand your frustration," Keisha said calmly, as she pulled on latex gloves and prepared to examine the engine. Her professional demeanor unaffected by Khalil's dismissive tone or his crude joke about marriage, because her experience with difficult customers and complex technical challenges had taught her to focus on solving problems rather than responding to personal slights. "Let me take a look and see what we're dealing with." The respectful but confident response immediately distinguished Keisha from other service providers who had interacted with Khalil, because most people either showed excessive deference to his wealth or reacted defensively to his sometimes abrasive personality. The mechanic's calm professionalism suggested someone who was accustomed to dealing with challenging technical problems and difficult customers without allowing either to affect her work quality. Her approach to the expensive Tiffany blue vehicle showed neither intimidation nor inappropriate eagerness, but rather the methodical confidence of someone who understood complex mechanical systems and possessed the diagnostic skills necessary to identify problems efficiently. The way she moved around the engine bay suggested familiarity with sophisticated technology rather than the hesitation he might have expected from someone he assumed had limited education or experience. The first thing she noticed was the meticulous care that had been taken to maintain the vehicle's appearance, with every visible component clean and properly positioned, suggesting that Khalil took pride in the car's condition and had invested in quality maintenance from qualified technicians. This attention to detail would make her diagnostic work easier because it indicated that any problems were likely recent developments rather than the result of long-term neglect. Khalil watched with growing surprise as Keisha began her examination of the engine with systematic precision that reminded him of the thoroughness he had observed among the most competent engineers and technical specialists in his business dealings. The mechanic's movements were efficient and purposeful, suggesting familiarity with complex mechanical systems rather than the tentative approach he might have expected from someone encountering unfamiliar technology. The diagnostic process she employed was clearly systematic and scientifically grounded, with her examination following logical sequences that suggested formal training in engineering principles rather than the trial and error methods he had assumed characterized automotive repair work. Her use of specialized tools and testing equipment demonstrated knowledge of proper diagnostic procedures that exceeded his expectations for a neighborhood mechanic. Her initial assessment included checking fluid levels, examining electrical connections, and listening to the engine's operation, with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was processing multiple streams of technical information simultaneously to develop hypotheses about possible failure modes. The methodical nature of her approach impressed Khalil, despite his initial skepticism about her capabilities. The symptoms you described suggest either a fuel delivery problem or an issue with the engine management system, Keisha explained, as she checked various components and connections, her diagnostic process revealing knowledge of automotive engineering principles that went far beyond basic mechanical repair skills. Have you noticed any performance issues before today, or did this come on suddenly? The technical questions that Keisha asked demonstrated understanding of how complex automotive systems functioned and the kinds of failures that could produce the symptoms Khalil had described. Her ability to communicate about technical matters in clear, understandable terms suggested both expertise and the kind of educational background that seemed inconsistent with her current work environment. The professional terminology she used was precise and accurate, indicating familiarity with automotive engineering concepts that typically required formal education or extensive specialized training to master. Her questions revealed systematic thinking about diagnostic possibilities that impressed Khalil despite his initial skepticism about her capabilities. "It was running perfectly this morning," Khalil replied, his tone becoming more respectful as he recognized that this mechanic possessed knowledge and skills that exceeded his initial assumptions. "The engine just suddenly lost power and started making strange noises that I've never heard before." The additional information about the failure pattern helped Keisha narrow her diagnostic focus to specific systems and components that were most likely to cause sudden power loss in high-performance vehicles. Her experience with complex propulsion systems had taught her to consider multiple failure modes simultaneously and to use systematic elimination processes to identify root causes efficiently. Her analysis of the symptoms suggested several possible causes, including fuel system contamination, electronic control unit malfunctions, or mechanical failures in critical engine components, each of which would require different diagnostic approaches and repair procedures. The challenge was determining which possibility was most likely given the specific combination of symptoms and the vehicle's maintenance history. As Keisha continued her examination, she began to notice anomalies in the engine's configuration that suggested previous modification or attempted repairs that had not been completed properly. The Lamborghini's sophisticated fuel injection and engine management systems showed signs of tampering that indicated someone had tried to adjust performance parameters without understanding the complex interdependencies between different systems. The evidence of amateur modification work was particularly concerning because improper adjustments to high-performance engines could cause catastrophic failures that would be both dangerous and extremely expensive to repair. The fact that the vehicle was still running suggested that any damage was probably limited, but identifying and correcting the underlying problems would require expertise that most mechanics did not possess. The modifications that had been attempted included changes to the engine's fuel mapping and ignition timing that were designed to increase power output but had been implemented without proper understanding of how these adjustments would affect other critical systems, including emissions control, engine cooling, and long-term component durability. "I think I found your problem," Keisha said, after 20 minutes of careful investigation, her tone carrying the satisfaction of someone who had successfully solved a challenging puzzle. "Someone has been modifying your engine control parameters, probably trying to increase performance, but they didn't understand how the changes would affect other systems." The diagnosis was delivered with confidence that reflected both her technical competence and her experience with similar problems, though the specific combination of issues she had identified was more complex than most mechanics would be equipped to address. The unauthorized modifications had created a cascade of problems that would require sophisticated understanding of engine management systems to resolve properly. "The good news is that no permanent damage has been done," she continued, already beginning to gather the tools and equipment she would need to correct the problems she had identified. "The bad news is that fixing this properly is going to take several hours and require some specialized knowledge about how these Italian systems interact with aftermarket modifications." The explanation revealed not only her diagnostic capabilities, but also her understanding of the broader context surrounding high-performance vehicle modifications and the kinds of problems that typically resulted from amateur attempts to enhance already sophisticated systems. Her assessment was both technically accurate and practically realistic about the time and expertise required for proper repair. Khalil stood in stunned silence as he processed the implications of what he had just heard, because the mechanic's diagnosis was more thorough and technically sophisticated than explanations he had received from Lamborghini dealership technicians who had been unable to resolve similar performance issues with other vehicles in his collection. The contrast between his initial dismissive assumptions and the reality of Keisha's expertise was profound and embarrassing, forcing him to confront his own prejudices about education, intelligence, and the kinds of people who worked in service industries. His casual joke about marriage now seemed particularly inappropriate given the level of professional competence she was demonstrating. The realization that he had encountered someone whose technical knowledge exceeded that of specialists he had paid premium prices to consult forced him to reconsider his assumptions about how expertise was distributed across different social and economic levels, and whether his wealth had been insulating him from recognizing genuine competence when it appeared in unexpected contexts. "How do you know so much about Lamborghini engine management systems?" he asked, genuine curiosity, replacing his earlier arrogance as he began to recognize that this woman possessed technical knowledge that exceeded what he would have expected from most automotive professionals. The question created an opportunity for Keisha to explain her background, though she was reluctant to discuss her NASA experience with customers who might view her career change as evidence of failure rather than understanding the family obligations that had motivated her decision to leave aerospace engineering for automotive repair. "I have an engineering background," she replied simply, focusing on the technical work rather than providing details about her education or previous career that might complicate their professional relationship or create expectations that could interfere with her ability to complete the repair efficiently. The modest response understated her qualifications significantly, but Keisha had learned that customers often reacted strangely when they discovered that their mechanic held advanced degrees and had worked on projects involving rocket engines and spacecraft propulsion systems. Some became intimidated and questioned whether she was overqualified for automotive work, while others became suspicious about why someone with her credentials would choose to work in a neighborhood auto shop. As she began the process of correcting the unauthorized modifications that had caused the engine problems, Keisha's work demonstrated the kind of systematic approach and technical precision that characterized high-level engineering projects. Her movements were efficient and purposeful, with each step of the repair process building logically on previous work to address the underlying problems comprehensively rather than simply treating symptoms. The complexity of the work required several hours of careful adjustment and testing, during which Khalil found himself increasingly impressed by both her technical competence and her professional dedication to achieving optimal results, rather than settling for quick fixes that might provide temporary solutions while leaving underlying problems unresolved. The repair process involved reprogramming multiple control modules, adjusting fuel delivery parameters, and recalibrating ignition timing to restore the engine to its proper operating specifications, while ensuring that all safety and emission systems continued to function correctly. The work required specialized diagnostic equipment and software that few independent shops would have access to or know how to use properly. This should resolve the performance issues you were experiencing, Keisha said, as she completed the final adjustments and began the process of testing the repaired systems to ensure that all modifications had been properly processed, corrected, and that the engine was operating within normal parameters. The testing process itself was thorough and systematic, involving multiple diagnostic checks and performance measurements that confirmed not only that the immediate problems had been resolved, but also that the engine was operating more efficiently than it had before the unauthorized modifications had disrupted its optimal functioning. When Keisha started the repaired Tiffany blue Lamborghini, the engine sound was immediately different from what Khalil had been hearing for months, with the smooth, powerful note that he remembered from when the vehicle had been new, replacing the subtle irregularities that he had gradually become accustomed to without realizing they indicated underlying problems. The difference in engine performance was immediately apparent during the test drive that followed, with the vehicle's acceleration, responsiveness, and overall operation restored to levels that exceeded Khalil's expectations and reminded him why he had originally chosen this particular model and configuration. "This is incredible," he said as they returned to the shop after the test drive, his voice carrying genuine amazement at the transformation that Keisha's work had achieved. "The car hasn't run this well since I bought it. How did you know exactly what needed to be done?" The question reflected his growing recognition that he had encountered someone whose technical expertise exceeded what he had experienced at authorized dealerships and specialty shops that charged premium prices for work that had not achieved the results that this neighborhood mechanic had produced in a few hours. "Experience with complex systems and systematic problem solving," Keisha replied, her answer revealing something about her approach to technical challenges while still maintaining appropriate professional boundaries about her background and qualifications. The successful completion of the repair had created a situation that neither of them had anticipated when Khalil had made his casual joke about marriage, because the quality of her work and the professionalism she had demonstrated throughout the process had completely transformed his perception of both her capabilities and her character. The joke that had been intended as a dismissive comment highlighting the impossibility of the repair task had become an awkward reminder of his own prejudices and inappropriate behavior, while also creating an unexpected connection between two people whose different backgrounds and circumstances would normally prevent them from ever meeting or recognizing their mutual respect for technical excellence and professional competence. "About what I said earlier," Khalil began, his tone showing genuine embarrassment about his earlier behavior and recognition that he owed her an apology for the disrespectful comment that had been motivated by assumptions rather than knowledge about her abilities or character. "It's fine," Keisha replied diplomatically, though her tone suggested that while she was willing to maintain professional courtesy, she had not forgotten or overlooked the casual disrespect that his comment had represented, even if she understood that his attitude had been based on ignorance rather than malicious intent. The conversation that followed revealed aspects of both their backgrounds and motivations that created unexpected common ground, despite their different circumstances and career paths. Khalil's passion for advanced technology and engineering excellence resonated with Keisha's scientific training, while her dedication to maintaining her father's legacy impressed him as someone who understood family obligations and personal sacrifice. Their discussion evolved beyond the immediate repair situation to include broader topics about career choices, family responsibilities, and the challenges of maintaining professional standards in environments that didn't always support or recognize excellence. Both had made significant sacrifices for principles they valued, though their specific circumstances and motivations were very different. Over the following months, Khalil became a regular customer at Precision Auto Works, not only for maintenance on his exotic vehicle collection, but also as someone who appreciated the quality of work and level of technical expertise that Keisha provided. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship, based on mutual respect and shared interests in engineering and technology. The connection between them deepened as Khalil learned more about Keisha's background and the sacrifices she had made to honor her family obligations. While she came to understand that beneath his sometimes arrogant exterior was someone who genuinely valued competence and integrity over social status or conventional expectations. Their relationship evolved slowly and carefully, with both of them aware that their different backgrounds and circumstances created social obstacles that would need to be navigated thoughtfully if their connection was to develop into something more than professional respect, friendship. The cultural and economic differences between them required ongoing dialogue and mutual education as they learned to appreciate each other's perspectives and values while building trust that transcended the superficial barriers that had initially separated them. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing to this channel. Now back to the story. 2 years later, when Khalil proposed marriage for real, rather than as a dismissive joke, he did so with full knowledge of Keisha's extraordinary qualifications and deep respect for the choices she had made to support her family and community. The Tiffany blue Lamborghini that had brought them together became a symbol of how unexpected encounters could lead to profound connections between people who might never have met under normal circumstances. Their wedding was held at Precision Auto Works, with the restored Tiffany blue supercar serving as both transportation and decoration for a celebration that honored their shared appreciation for technical excellence, family values, and the kind of love that could emerge from mutual respect and recognition of each other's true worth, beyond surface appearances or social expectations. The ceremony brought together friends and family members from both their worlds, creating an unusual but meaningful gathering that reflected the way their relationship had bridged different communities and social contexts through genuine connection based on shared values rather than conventional compatibility. Markers.